Hello, Nicole. Welcome to the Grand Slam Journey podcast. So great to have you. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Klara, for having me here. I'm doing well. Thank you. How about you?
All good here. Enjoying the weather. It's been great in Texas, although we did have some storms earlier this week. But that's not what we're going to talk about. I know we're here mostly to talk about your Grand Slam journey of life. You're currently sales leader at Microsoft, enabling go-to-market strategies and leading high-performance team to accelerate growth. With focus on software as a service and platform as a service global solutions. But you also have beautiful multicultural background. You've moved several different countries, and in childhood you were a competitive skier. I love skiing, so actually I'm super excited to dive into that. I wish I had more time to ski still in the winter. It's one of the sports that I still enjoy the most nowadays. So that's a quick intro for me, but I want to hand it to you. What would you want listeners to know about you? What would you want to add?
Thank you, Klara. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Nicole Wieberneit. Currently live with my family in Greater Seattle. Besides being, working in go-to-market and sales strategy, I wear different hats. I'm a mother of 3 teenage girls. So that's the reason why I need to work to have some kind of clear mind. My dog Loki, another female in our family. So that keeps me insane because I actually walk and need to get out there. I would say, as personally, I really have a passion for experiences. So from cooking to traveling to sport, but also when I look at my work, I really like to drive great employee and customer experiences. And so from a work perspective, I'm looking after a team of sales or go-to-market strategists. And I'm currently running an experiment at Microsoft on how can we sell better across our portfolio and really how can we have the customer in mind, getting more customer centric, and how can I design impactful customer and employee experiences to grow our sales revenue. So that's a little bit about my background.
I love that. Starting from the experience and diving right into it, I think there is nothing that can replicate. And obviously, Microsoft is a great and big company who understands it. There's many other companies who kind of live and breathe this, but the obsession with experience, it always drives more sales, right? It's how do employees and customers feel? If it's done in the right way, will then trigger to obviously more sales, brand loyalty, retention, low churn, and many other great metrics that business leader look after. But maybe going all the way to the start in your upbringing, and I'm always curious how my guests grow up and where they grow up. I have many international guests. You're also from Germany, so maybe if you take us back to your childhood, what was your upbringing like? And I've hinted you were a competitive skier. So what led you to your sport?
So I was born really in the German Alps and about 1,000 meters above zero. No idea what that is in feet. But so, and maybe people can remember it with listeners here on the Castle Neuschwanstein, which is mirrored after basically Disney has mirrored that castle. So that's where I basically grew up in a small village there. My family was very well known, and my granddad was the founder of the ski club, and he helped fundraise and build like a ski jumping facility. And if you go back, so he was really obsessed with skiing, and he drove with his motorbike, having the skis on the back, really up to Oberstdorf, where the big jumping competitions are still there, and to really live his life of being skiing. So I really grew up with that kind of upbringing from very, very early on. So I would say I got skis put into my crop. And when I was born and started with about 2 years on to really got put onto ski, my mom really was the one who had the passion. So she took me out on a very young age. Even we had our own lift in the village to go there or even going into other areas. And with about 4 or 5, I joined the ski club. So now you need to understand the German school system. In Germany, school ends at lunchtime. So you actually have a lot of time in the afternoon. And we had that small lift in our village. So I went home, had lunch. I put my skis on and skied down. I could just ski down a hill, and I was there at the lift. And so we were always a bunch of kids, and which used that ski lift, and we built our own jumps. We went through the woods. We tried different tricks. And for me, it was all about the camaraderie and playing outside together. And then on the weekends, we then had race practices, or basically the races were on. And for me, more and more it came out. I especially loved the speed disciplines and the thrill which comes with going down. And until today, I get the most joy when I think about, doing first tracks in a fresh, prepared, hard run and speeding down and with as little curves as you can do. And that gives me a lot of pleasure. I feel like I'm free, I'm flying, a little bit like that. So that was like, my kind of daily routine. And even, when you're going higher in school, you still have your afternoons free. When I was then 17, the head coach offered me to pay for a coaching license. So I thought to myself, hey, that is, first of all, I can give something back to younger girls because I was the only girl in the ski club. And I can bring them in because I was focusing on younger kids under 10. But it's also a good way when you think about going into college and university to earn some money in the evening. So I took that on and then started my coaching life. Unfortunately, nowadays, I'm only a few days up in the mountains. So, Clara, I have exactly the same problem. And I actually have a mountain here in Seattle just behind me. But I did ski the Rockies. I skied all over Europe. I skied in New Zealand where I lived. Japan is still on my bucket list, and definitely some of the other places like Aspen. So nowadays, with having 3 kids, and skiing is an expensive sport, unfortunately, and the time is not there. But that's a little bit about my skiing journey and my life and how I did get there.
Love it. I have several questions I want to dive into, but maybe the first one, do you have a favorite mountain when you think back, a favorite one you like to go to or used to enjoy skiing on?
I think my biggest memory, and when I go back, is Schladming in Austria. That's when I did a lot of skiing holidays with my parents. They took out 1 week to really go away and ski. And for me, Austria has something with the atmosphere of the huts and the
Yeah.
village and the feel. Plus, there were I think 4 connected mountains. So you actually have quite a wide variety of runs that you can go down to. So that's for me, from an atmosphere feel perspective. I think from the best runs was France. I have been in Tignes, and the long runs and the amount of kilometers you can go and the changes, it's massive. But there was a lot of concrete in the mountains, etc. From the skiing itself, I think the best experience I ever had was heli skiing in Canada, in the Rockies there. Before we had kids, my husband and I, we flew 2 weeks to Canada to ski Lake Louise, Sunshine Village, and we did a day of heli skiing.
Wow, that's impressive. I just recently actually see some of my friends doing helicopter skiing out of Alaska, and it seems like as well everyone who has a dream of trying it out, when they do, everyone says is actually exactly what they imagine or more. It's one of the best experiences of their lives they have had. I haven't done it yet, so maybe I need
You
to
should put it on your
plan
list.
one. Yeah, that
Yes.
sounds impressive. And you have to send me your list. Sorry, Austria, did you say Schlamming or what was
Schladming,
the?
yes.
Oh,
Schladming in
okay,
the
great.
Steiermark, which have also very good food. Back to my
Mhm.
experiences. I love food.
Well, it's when you go on vacation, it seems like it's just a perfect pairing. And I agree, Austria with kind of the villages and the mountain, it has this kind of beautiful just environment. It all comes together for that, what you mentioned,
Yeah.
experience actually that we started with.
Yeah, and it's actually, when you think about that, even Italy, the German speaking part, like
Mhm.
Kronplatz or Madonna di Campiglio, it's really
Yes.
interesting because it's similar flared in Austria.
Hmm.
And then it depends on how much snow it fall because of the other side of the mountains. So with climate change, you might think
Yes.
twice. Sometimes they
It's
have a lot of snow, sometimes not, and it's depending.
Yeah, actually, on that note, we went to Kronplatz. That's been our place. Actually, more my mom and my sister, they've been going there. It was their 20-year anniversary, actually. They haven't been there every year, but they've been going there now for almost 20 years in a row. And it was just so disappointing. It was the first year ever. It was raining. And so it was just one of the worst weather experiences we have had. But I love Kronplatz for kind of the reasons you had mentioned. They have long runs, wide slopes, so you can go fast around people. You don't have to kind of be behind anyone, and they groom all night. And so when you go in the morning, I love the feeling of the fresh grooms. You can still kind of see the lines under your skis, and that first lift up at like 8:30 is just fantastic. So I love going in
Yeah.
early and experiencing pretty much exactly what you had said on the skis. It reminds me, maybe just to share, there's one black diamond. It actually is on the side, but because it's on the side, there's not many people in the morning, and we used to stay in a cottage right by it. And it part of it is like super steep, so it's almost like anybody who's watching is like this type of angle, like part of the slope. But when you go in the morning, not many people are there, and you have control because it's freshly groomed. You can go really fast. And it reminds me almost being like a dragon from Avatar, like the biggest dragons that they're flying. I was like, I have that feeling. It's like the biggest dragon in Avatar, and you're just flying down the hill and nobody can catch you. I love it.
But that is exactly the feeling I have when I'm on ski. So I compare it like a bird that can fly, but it
Yes.
feels like I can do everything and I'm free. It's a very emotional stage, and it's really what
Yes.
I think drives a lot of my passion.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I can imagine when you grew up feeling it, I guess, what do you replace it with? So maybe we'll come back to it. But I also want to touch on, you mentioned you were the only girl in your ski club, which is interesting because given you come from a countryside, it seems like there's really just hills, and that's what the only thing you all did in the afternoon. I would have thought there would be more girls kind of joining the fun. So if you reflect back, was there something different? Was it because your family was so much into skiing that led you to the sport perhaps more than others, and it's not as typical for girls? Because I think skiing is still not completely guy sport. I would have thought there would be more boys and girls sort of mix.
It's actually a really good question. And I was just reflecting back because even when I think about the, so not only the ski club itself, but being in the afternoon out there, it was mainly boys. And it was really very little females that did it. And I can remember that even, we built these jumps. I never went over them, but I was the one who said it's cleared. Um, to go. But no, I think it had to do a lot. Why I joined was because of my upbringing and my family, with my grandfather being one of the founder and the head of the ski club. And it's not only that I was doing downhill skiing, I was also at the beginning doing cross country skiing. I mean, I had female friends, don't get me wrong,
Yes.
but they were not out there. I don't know why. I hope it's changing, and you definitely see that. And when I look at, my girls, they all ski and they all had to learn ski because it's a passion of mine, and it's still a family kind of sport, and we going up there together, and it's something we actually can do together. But if you look at like the parks itself, etc., they're mainly boys. I think it's probably that risk taking and
Mhm.
enjoying these things, but I have no idea.
Maybe the parks I sort of get because my partner always tells me is like first, men never grow up. And even if we pretend that we do, we always stuck at the 15 years of age. And the things that we do when we're teenagers, it's actually impressive that more of us don't die because we just do crazy stuff just because we're boys and we think it'll be cool. So I think there's something, especially in kind of the teenage years growing up, and the combination of aggressivity and like the positive playful side on the man, but the playfulness with it and trying to see who can do the crazy thing and still stay alive, I think is something that is
But
just born on average in
yeah,
the male kind of category. Yeah.
but I think even when I think back on racing, it's probably we had 3 times more boys racing than
Mm.
females over all the
Yeah.
clubs within the regions. Yeah, definitely far more boys.
And you recently went to Whistler. I'm
Yes,
curious, how was
exactly.
that?
We had awesome kind of snow and weather. It was basically, you had all the seasons from spring skiing,
Mm-hmm.
slushy, warm, especially in the afternoon, to hard runs, sunshine, fresh powder. So you really could go into deep powder skiing.
Yeah.
And especially during the week, there was not that many people around. So it
Mm-hmm.
was great. And then trying out some runs, and then you have my kids. So like I said, it's really teenage girls, so get them speaking. So like driving in a car, sitting them next to you, it's the same on going up the lift. You learn a lot about what's going on in their life. They're making these selfies, and then wherever they pose. But it's a good connection that you can have with the family and time out there, and then enjoy together. And then I have one who likes going through the jumps, the other one likes to speed, the third one really likes to go off piste. So
Nice.
it's
So
good.
you have a whole mix. You gotta vote and decide which slope or which terrain you're gonna do when. That's good.
Yeah, and then
Variety.
we also split up, or the one
Yeah.
goes later, or one
Yeah.
stops earlier. So we do that. So you always have someone you can ski with, because they're now old enough and they go the same speed. It's not like you need to wait like when they were young. And especially my youngest one, she could drive me nuts because she was very headstrong. So she started skiing when she was 2, and she wanted to go up the piste. And I'm like, you can't do that. And I was scared, her in the chairlift, that she falls out, and like she wasn't allowed to move, because I'm actually afraid of heights. So
Uh,
my passion for skiing pushes me to use the chairlift and things like that.
that's a good combination because some of the chairlifts, yeah, they have a really good height. So if you look down, I can see how
I,
that could be a good combination of overcoming your fear and then having the joy of going down the hill fast and
yeah.
being free. I love that. So, building on that, and maybe along the line of experiences, you have had many international and multicultural experiences. Obviously, you shared about your upbringing in Germany, but then you also lived in Canada, New Zealand. Then you moved back to Germany, and now you're in US in the Seattle area. So I'm curious about the multicultural upbringing and maybe what drove some of those changes for you, and even if there's a specific country or city you enjoyed living in the most.
I think what always drove me, I wanted to travel a lot. So my mom is actually, she loves to travel. So she was already in about more than 100 countries. So when I was young, we traveled a lot. So like I was 6 years old, I was in
Mm.
Senegal, Africa. So that's kind of,
Mm.
see the world and you see a difference. And then I found that while growing up in the mountains and having that close, tight knit, I felt like I was holding back in a cage. So I just couldn't wait once I finished high school to go away. I moved into another city, and then during university itself, I studied for a year in the UK and went there. So that kind of that learning to see and exploring different cultures is probably a big drive, why I moved a lot around. When you have that kind of global setting and you had the first taste and you're coming back. I mean, I can remember when I studied in the UK for a year and come back, you see the world in a different way. And actually you see things which you have done before you don't like that much. A lot of people say it's harder to come back than to actually go away.
Mm.
And so that seeing new things, learning new things, and it's still that kind of interest in innovation and that interest to do something new combined with that traveling is which really drives to go after new kind of positions. And we always moved because of job. It was not
Mm.
because we said, hey, we would like to go there. No, it's like we moved from Canada to New Zealand. We have never been to New Zealand before. And
Mm.
we agreed to go there. And it was like, okay, what is the worst that could happen? We don't like it, then we move on and go to the next ones. Now I forgot the other question.
Did
Second
you
one.
have a favorite place you lived
Oh
in
yeah,
or a city? Yeah.
yes. So that definitely it's New Zealand. It's
Mm.
for me, from an upbringing perspective, from kids, the work-life balance is amazing. And we talked about, from
Yes.
the skiing in the mountains there, you have basically all the climate zones from glaciers to deserts. So you're always very close to the water, and family and private time is very important. So when I think back, I'm a consultant in Germany. You still were, on client side at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. There people leave the office by 4:30. You're the only one
Mm-hmm.
in the office. Doesn't mean these people don't work hard or come back, but it is like, hey, you go, it's family time. And I think that kind of lifestyle is what really drawed me into and gave me that kind of pleasure. And so I have New Zealand citizen nowadays, and I think that is where
Mm.
we will retire. On the other side, the negative impact is because it's so far away from everything. There are no jobs. There is no manufacturing industry there. So you basically have tourism and then government and a little bit of construction, etc. So
Yes.
the type of jobs that are available are very, very limited. So if you want to make a career and you want to go to the next step or you want to learn more, there is limited options. And I run my own consulting company at that time. And we were focusing on SAP CRM and the product ecosystem. So really consulting from strategic IT consulting to implementation. But SAP changed their strategy. Salesforce came very heavily in and grew in the cloud space, as well as like Microsoft was putting on the cloud. So we basically started to see we are losing our kind of livelihood because somebody
Mm.
else changed the strategy. So we had to look at what are our options. And like I said before, we always move because of jobs, and we have one actually rule in our family. We optimize for our family career. We opted to have kids,
Mm.
so we decided to move again, and it went to Germany at that point in time.
And that's also smart. I think some people don't realize having kids come with obligation, and you need to prioritize, and you need to kind of adjust your life kind of based on the seasons, right? And what's most important for you. And so I love that you mentioned it, because sometimes I come across people that like had kids or have kids. It's like, oh, now I have to do this and this and this. It's like, yeah, that's what having kids mean. That's why you kind of have to build your life around them to help support they're
Yes,
becoming a great human and productive human in society, whatever that means
but
for them. Yeah.
I think also it's important to not forget yourself.
Mm.
So you need to have a balance, because I also seen the other ones where you have really great, trained, educated women who have done a career and then they are stay-at-home moms.
Mm.
And it's like, is that all that you wanted? Because when I think about how fast we both work in the technology sector. 5 years is like a lifetime. Your
Yes.
knowledge
Yeah.
is old, and so you're taking so much time out. You basically have to start from scratch. And not only is your career
Mm.
on hold, you're basically not growing. And that has a huge impact, because your kids at one point will leave. Yes, they need you and you need to be there for them. Yeah. And I'm not saying you should abandon and travel all the time, but how can you make a balance for both? And I think for myself, and a lot of time that was then finding balance. Now I can, at the moment, they're a teenager, I can say now I can grow and I can impact further, but I stayed and grew at the same time. And I think for your own self and for own confidence and your own values, think about what is the right path for you. And I cannot say my path is the right one for everyone. For God's sake, probably people think I am crazy. I think you need to find your own one, because your kids will leave, your husband, who knows what happens to them. I had friends where they died very early on, and then you're standing there with amount of debts which you need to go after.
I also think, being from Europe, it's more of the common structure because the social setting is different than here in the US. Schools here for kids in the US are much more expensive. Obviously, depending on the job, you may or may not make more money. But for example, I have friends who are teachers, which you don't make very much money being a teacher. And so eventually what that means is pretty much your whole salary goes towards somebody else watching your kids. So I think in those examples, like, I sort of understand, well, do you rather want to be there and raise your kids, or do you want to teach other kids, and pretty much whatever you earn goes towards somebody else taking care of your kids? So those are definitely some of the things and priorities people have to make, and the decisions they have to make for themselves.
You said it. They need to make the decision for themselves and think about it. And I get it. You know, at the beginning, we spent a lot of money. I mean, we still do. I'm currently selecting colleges here in the US.
So maybe going back to your career in business and technology, you mentioned you had consulting firm and worked with CRM and SAP. And it seems like you've really built your career on CRMs, customer relationship management systems. It seems to be one of your bread and butter, kind of looking at your LinkedIn profile that you have started with even back in the day before maybe people completely knew what CRM was. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about that beginning, or even maybe go one step further. What led you towards business and technology? Was there any trend from your background and upbringing that made you be curious about that intersection of those two?
I like to be stand out. I think that was one of the things which drove me also why I went into skiing. But when I was at actually high school and thought of what I want to study, and until then, I always knew what I wanted to do. And I went for mathematics and economics with a minor in computer science. And I had that idea, I go into strategic consulting and, you know, Boston Consulting Groups, McKinsey's of this world. However, at that point in time, SAP had the big kind of growth time, you know, going from SAP R2 to 3. And it was a hot name in the German market. Think about, you know, first kind of normally you had IBM's or HP was the name of the house. And there was that company in the middle of Germany who's good. So I decided to apply and I got selected. And what was interesting for me, it included a 5-month training period at the beginning. Whereas when you would go to an Accenture at that point in time or Deloitte, it was like basically immediately going on to the job. And I was like, I'm not sure, you know, we talked about women and imposter syndrome. I want to learn first and be prepared. So I went into IT consulting and I actually really loved it. I didn't have a clear picture where I wanted to go, but I could travel a lot. I was together with other people and at the same time, I grew, I learned. And my first big implementation project was actually with Maximum AB, a distributor of alcoholic beverages out of Amsterdam, where I was responsible for the marketing and sales process integration. And this got me really hooked into the topic of customer experience and CRM and having that kind of end-to-end kind of view, that more holistic view, because it wasn't only the CRM, but when you set up a promotion? How do you do accruals and finance? How do you think about the supply chains? So that was the starting point. And then throughout the next 16 years, I've really stayed into that SAP ecosystem and built my CRM consulting career up, including running my own company. So that's really what got started. And what I've done all the time was I always wanted to learn more. I always thought bigger. So when you're coming in, and I think there's a big difference in, we call it an all IT consultant, but I think there were some are consultants, some are configurators. And if you can stand up and really being that kind of translator from business requirement and can speak that business language and get that into IT and how to set it up, and then you see how that lands when you're going live and they can work that new system and it's easier for them. I think user interfaces and having easy to use, back to that employee experience, is so important, more important than having some automation to really get the user bringing in. And you can see that you have that vision, then how it should look like. Whereas often when you talk to the current kind of uh, employees who are running that kind of in that department, they're often stuck in their process. But if you can help them to achieve that next step, I think that's very satisfying. So I already then talked about when SAP basically got themselves a little bit out of the market after 16 years, Microsoft actually knocked on my door and asked me if I want to join. So it was for me a big, big leap. And I was ready, having done 16 years from strategy consulting, so business case with L'Oreal Canada, having done the first kind of implementation of loyalty management in Asia, one of the first kind of trade promotion management. So a lot of that kind of early innovation incubation projects, plus that kind of end-to-end view, I was like, okay, it's time. I need to learn something new. You can only go so much. So I went from the SAP ecosystem and jumped into Microsoft. So from delivery to sales. Why? When you're doing delivery and you have your own company, you're doing sales, but it's different because you're getting far more structured in, and you're having a bag that you need to carry and you need to close. But then it was like, oh my God, I don't know the customers. I don't know the partner ecosystem because it's so different. And then you think, oh my God, I need to learn a new kind of software system. By the way, it's not that hard. It's all just the same processes. But it really got me out of my comfort zone. And that was a really, really big growth time in my life. And the learning that you can actually take all that implementation. I show up as a trusted advisor to the customers because I speak the language back. I can translate, and it doesn't matter. They actually don't care what kind of software system in the end. It needs to reflect their goals and what they want to achieve and their processes. That started to get me the ground. And when within Microsoft, we have this kind of expert selling teams, especially when you think about new incubation products. And we had the relationship or partnership with Adobe, with Microsoft, and they were looking for someone to be that kind of expert seller in that customer experience or MarTech piece. That was to move them from New Zealand to Germany, where I was the CTO of that partnership, and then going into sales management and then sales strategy. And it was really great time, actually one of my best times working with that kind of global team. We were 6 people all across the world coming together, and we did strategy, we did testing, we executed, we won, new customers. We went to events like Adobe Summit, Speaker, and was then the stepping stone for where I am at now at Microsoft.
I love your description of kind of the end-to-end career. It seems like you really had almost every single role when it comes to CRM management. You've kind of seen it from implementation to delivery to obviously having your own consulting firm to jumping into sales. So I appreciate you kind of mentioning even that fear that goes into jumping from which you mentioned you have done some of sales, but to like pure sales roles. Like from my experience, I always thought delivery people are fantastic sales. Like it just requires just a small pivot back because you already know all the things that go into implementing. You understand the whole process. Really jumping into sales is just, 5-10% reframing towards the customer, how you ask them the question, which you already typically know from experience what the pain points are and what you need to ask them. So I love what you mentioned about that step, or I want to say pivot. It's not completely pivot, but it's just a progression and taking a different side of kind of the holistic ecosystem. When you look back, you highlighted a few roles that you seem very passionate about, but anything else you want to specifically point to that were either roles or experiences that helped you sharpen some of the skills, and they may have been either things that you have won and were great, or sometimes I think it's the hard times and some of the failures or mistakes that refine our skills even more, some of the things that perhaps come a bit harder to us that we had to learn through some of the tougher experiences.
When I look at my good times, and a really great project was actually that project in Amsterdam, which, it was my first really implementation project. And I was given at the beginning that configurator role, but they could see and the talent when I can talk. So within that one, within 4 months, I basically got to be that lead consultant. Immense growth. I think when you're younger, you take these risks easier. Yeah, and you just go where else nowadays you think, oh my God, all went wrong. But when I look back, that was amazing, because it's not only that we worked hard, we played hard. That, think back, that was, when was it? 2001? Money was not an objection. We had greenfield project which costs millions of dollars. If you think about an interface, we built that interface. If you need something, you're going. So that type of project, being part of that, but that was pure international project, not only from the consultants, but from the customer. The person who was responsible for supply chain management came out of Australia. The one for CRM, for marketing, was in the Netherlands. The one for sales was out of the UK. So knowing that and seeing that kind of experience and your growth and what you can achieve, and that somebody is really believing in you, I found that was really good. The other one was for L'Oreal Canada. I was already the expert for trade promotion management, and there was hardly anyone around the world which had a lot of that knowledge. And they looked for someone doing a business case. And I actually did that as a contract at the side while I was finishing my PhD. And having kids, by the way. So think about, what do you get out of, what's the priority back? But being there, knowing that you're a real expert and believing in you, and that is actually that expertise and that reputation opens up doors for you. And I know there was in leadership principles, there was someone who said either you're an expert in reputation or you're going really general management kind of thing, but people need to decide at one point. And I think going back to reflecting on my career, I need that kind of being an expert and immerse myself in it, because that opens my door. I need that grounding for myself to be confident and really be able to drive that, and that I can run these kind of strategic process. So that was really like kind of the second big thing. I think from experience perspective and learning is, you learn from failures and where things are not going that well. I would say, especially when I moved from SAP into the Microsoft ecosystem, and I lost that kind of ecosystem. And you come into a role. I was the only one in New Zealand, the first one who had that role. So you then need to connect back to other people. You don't have that role model. And then you're doing a lot of things not right. I can tell you that. Yeah. So you think like, doing sales. Oh my God, the customer is selling and you're forecasting it that it's closing and they're like far away because you didn't ask. You have budget. What is your timeline? Who is your executive sponsor for that? So these things which you then learn in the hardcore, because it's like the sales management comes down on you and saying, hey, where are you and what you can do. The last recent kind of change, and I think a lot of us in technology went through it at the moment. It's this kind of restructuring that happening, and where a lot of investments in tech companies shift. So you get actually restructured. You mind, I was responsible in business application for low code, MarTech technology, fraud, and mixed reality. And they were like, no, you're going and doing cross solutions. So how do you take that on? Now we talked about having that expertise. Now you should be looking after the whole kind of end-to-end solution. How do you deal with that? It's not that they don't look for you for this expertise, but the go-to-market expertise. And how do you deal with, I don't know what's coming. You have these layoffs. Are you the next one? And how do you deal with that internally to focus on what you can do? What you can influence, driving basically towards somebody else's vision. Before because of being expert, I had my vision and I could then tell that to my people down into Raleigh. And now you're there. Okay, what is the vision? And you look up and you wait to come. And it's like, don't wait, build it out yourself, because that is really what is a leader about. That you create that vision, that you create that clarity, that you're going through ambiguous situation and create energy, positive energy for your people, and to learn that. And so that was quite a big learning from my side recently.
I love especially the last one you mentioned, Nicole, because I think there's many people nowadays going through the same, the uncertainty and ambiguity, whether it is actually across the world, like the macroeconomic, the wars that are going on, the economic instability, the headwinds and tailwinds that people see in different industries, the turbulence within. I feel there's a lot of people that I see posts even online or coming to me is like, what do we do? There's just so much going on. And it's hard to distill or filter through what their own focus should be like, which is very similar to what you had described in the last role. So can you drill down a little bit more into that, some of the learnings you have that from that specifically, or what things you have implemented to thrive in that role?
So the first thing I think you need to ask, what is the vision of your higher people? So now, or in my sense, the VP, and we were a completely newly founded department, with a VP leader from outside coming into Microsoft, and then some strong underneath people supporting that, so the GM level. I had new people, so learning, first of all, what are they thinking, where they want to go. A lot of talk and integration, understanding where they're coming from, because I think a lot of issues we are having is because of communication gaps. And it's not because you said something and I did one. It's just both worlds, both sides can actually be true. Yeah. Because
Yes.
of that kind of upbringing. So how do you get that communication going? How do you then, not only with your upper level management, but also with your down, with your team, how do you bring them along? And for me, things is like, bringing them together on site. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that. So because of budget cuts, then and at that point in time, you saw the things going. So how can you, where actually in-person relationships are so important, how can you still create a sense of belonging when you're getting put together? So how do you build team morale? How do you bring them with you? So I think having workshops together, just thinking about trying to solve a problem. So our first problem was, what are the motions we should go after? We have Microsoft, my God, the product palette is so wide, but what should we do? So, and we all had some kind of report history and where we worked into back with that. So how can we bring that together? So it was brainstorming session, but then you need to look at it from a non-biased viewpoint, from a company perspective. What is the best impact? So what are the criteria you're setting? So you're building the plane while flying and trying to bring the people along with you. So it's a lot of communication, being very open. And I found it interesting because we were basically two parallel teams, and I was very open. I said, look, you came out from a product perspective XYZ. We will not focus on your product. Do you want to be part of that great Microsoft investment? I think the future and how we're doing. And you have great go-to-market expertise. But if that's not what you want, I help you getting another job. So driving clarity, it sounds hard at that moment in time, but it gives them at least an option to say where do they want to go or not, instead of trying to soften that language. Oh yeah, let's see. It's actually, in my perspective, not necessarily good in the long run. So I think that driving clarity, being not harsh, but clarity is really being friendly and employee friendly, and then being there and help them. So for me, and being authentic, saying, look, I'm here as well. I don't know yet what our mission will be, but we can drive it together. And then I think taking time for yourself. You're often so many meetings. Stop that noise. Take that out, because you as a leader need to have a vision where you need to go. So take that time now when you've built, you done brainstorm. So what is it really what you want to go after? And then what does it mean for the team to put that in place, and how should I run? And that started in, how do I build the team? How should I get someone focused on what? What is our measurements? What are the operational structures I need to have in place? While I might not need that much kind of structure because I can live with ambiguity, other people are not. And that is another question. It's like, can you live in that kind of ambiguous environment, which is like doing strategy for incubation products or go to market? Because to be honest, if the company decides to de-invest in it, you're gone. So it's, how can you deal with risk? It has nothing to do with knowledge. It's character. It's really how much can you deal with it, and how much can you think, okay, if that's not, then it's the next product or the next thing. And I think that a lot of questions came around that. I think it comes down to really the values that you have, your own values, and if that fits with the department or company value. And if you have that, it's, I recently learned about that, leadership within, because then you can water a lot of different kind of situations.
I love so many things what you mentioned, just trying to prioritize what I want to touch on. I love you highlighting clarity. It reminded me a quote from, I think it's Brené Brown, who said, clear is kind,
Yes.
unclear is unkind. And I think that's such a great skill in business. I personally resonate with it too. And maybe to some degree, I'm almost too clear for a salesperson because I love to just understand the reality. I think if you don't know where we stand from reality perspective, you cannot draft a good clarity. So that's one thing I've been always pondering out. Is it because my athletic upbringing? Because like in sports, you always have to know like what your plan is. And skiing is individual sport. It's like you racing against the clock. So there's some sense of this clarity and reality. You know exactly what you did wrong. If you don't know, your coaches will tell you that with a clear precision of what you have to do. So I wonder how much of that maybe you even personally think sort of connected to it, and also tying into the risk taking. So I'm curious now, we talked about your skiing background and the playfulness and a lot of risk taking there, including your moves that you have done. So how has that shaped you from risk taker? Or if you want to drill down a little bit more, how would you categorize yourself? Because I also think like stability, at least at this point in my life, it's actually not that as important. I just love doing like great audacious things that haven't been done, and having ambiguity and trying figure things out is really thrilling for me. And I judge, just based on listening to you, it's quite the same for you. That's obviously why you're probably in this group and trying to build all of this stuff, that innovation and trying to play with ideas and what fits is quite exciting.
I think actually two things, and I would like to take it in two parts. So on the clarity and leadership, I think sometimes it's the culture, because as a German, you're very direct. Yeah, and you know you're direct. It's like if you look at me, if you would have called me on a phone 15 years ago, or I would have called you, I wouldn't have said, hey, Klara, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. I would just come to the point. Can you help me on X, Y, Z? So that kind of very direct and giving very direct feedback, I think it's a culturally thing as well. I think that compared with understanding what it takes, and while it's actually uncomfortable for the person who says it, that I think it's Brené Brown, clarity is kind, and is because it makes you feel uncomfortable. And yes, maybe the other person at that point in time is a little bit shocked, but my experience is they're coming back at one point, they're saying, it's good. And I have a former team member, which I had to manage out, and I found him another role, and he still thinks I was his best manager. So it's like, if I wouldn't have driven that clarity, it might be driven further down. But having these examples in front of you actually helps you, because people often, they know these things. In your gut, something is not right.
Yes.
So it is then, how can you build a trusted relationship where you can build on that trust and you can be open about that and being able to take the emotion as much as possible out of the equation and saying, let's talk about that and going the next step. So that's just a little bit for me where I see that clarity and the upbringing comes a little bit in, and then a lot of learnings and maybe having good role models who have done that. Then the other question, and I think it's that's actually generally more DNA perspective, than anything else. I think when I look at my parents, my mom is the risk taker. My dad is more like not, and you will not change that. I mean, you have to someone who pushes it. And I think I'm generally speaking a risk taker, but I also like to plan. So if I take the risk, what is then the planning around that? But I like new things, new innovation, which overcomes that risk. And I think it's that why, that inner why, what you need to have to be successful, and then overcoming some of the obstacles as like in that moment in time. Okay, I feel like, oh God, I'm out of my comfort zone, but I know I need to do that to be happy, because that is my higher ground. So I think that drives a lot around that. But for that, you really need to know yourself and know what are your values, what you need to drive in life. Now, I think over the time, so I had 2 jobs that I resigned because I was not happy without having anything else. Yeah, so really high risk taking in that sense. But I believed something will come, and actually always the next better thing, and actually the next drive came. But now I'm older. I have the teenage girls. They need to go to university. So you're getting into like, I'm 8 years at Microsoft. I've never been that long beside my own company, along in a company. And then you look at, oh my God, the stock options that I have. So it's things starting to blur the more you learn. And I think the older you get, the less risks you take. However, you feel it in yourself. And that's why I think you need to sometimes go back to your values. So it's finding what are your values, and then do I live within the values that I need? And you can go left and right a little bit, don't get me wrong, and you always will be. It's not 100%, but if that's not, do I need to find another role, or do I need to go and do something on the side to get that going? So I think that's where on how I think about these things, but I think it changes the older you're getting because on the learnings, like teenagers, you said it at the beginning, teenagers doing so much crazy shit. I missed school a lot. I forged signatures. Oh my God. If I think about that, I would never do that again.
Well, I have a few thoughts, actually, so many thoughts on what you said. One, I want to go back to the thrill because I wonder if this is the same for you. I think risk for anyone isn't pleasant, but what I personally find joy is the thrill of chasing and creating something and the innovation. And so the whole messy process, it's so fun and messy sometimes and chaotic, but when you see the result, like the risk consideration just goes to the side because you get so focused on the creation and the fun part of it that drives joy, that kind of the risk taking is then like lower priority. I wonder if that's similar feeling for you.
Yes, it is. And I think what I'm trying to get back to more what I enjoyed and being
Mm,
just generally enjoying. I'm currently enjoying my path
mm,
far more, but it's because I let myself go. It's like just running towards that and not having that kind of goal. Because to be honest, we talked about my career. None of that was really planned like that.
mm,
I took an opportunity and took it on. And that's when the thing was, when it offered it to me, I went for it. But I never had, oh, I want to be this and that. Man, I said at the beginning, I wanted to be that strategic consultant. And now I am basically working in strategy, but it wasn't, I want to get there and then it's these and these steps. That's not me. But letting go and enjoying,
mm.
and that's back to the experiences. And what I
Yes.
think you put it on a point, it's the experience itself which
Mm,
drives me. And when I went into, oh, I need to get a VP, I need to get that, that's actually when I hardened in self and didn't
yes.
enjoy. And I think that was when I wasn't that successful. Then when
Mm-hmm.
that playful back, like that child in myself, I think that's how I would describe it. But I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, and I love you mentioning it. One of the learnings I take from my tennis career, there's many, but one of the key ones I always say, if I didn't care about tennis as much, I could have been a better tennis player, which means sometimes you try so hard to where the trying hard creates diminishing impact because you're just pushing up the hill or you overtraining that creates a whole bunch of injuries. And so one of the things, and including why I have my podcast, there's many reasons, but it creates this 15 to 30% of a separate identity for me and this like playfulness side to where I'm not just my job, I have like something else fun. So that's like me taking some of the learnings from tennis because I always felt like if I wanted to play tennis 15 to 20% less than I wanted to, I could have been a better athlete because I would end up doing less. And that doing less allows you to be more flexible and adaptable. And I had exact the same feelings in when you kind of said earlier on in my career, or maybe not that earlier, midway through, I was like, oh, I want to get this amount of money. And I want to get this job. And I always found a way to get the title and get the money. And then I got it, I was like, yeah, I'm not any happier. Like it doesn't drive me satisfaction. I think it was like important for me to get those points because at that point in time I found it important. And it was definitely a goal. And obviously, if I wouldn't have gotten there, maybe I wouldn't have the learning. I would still wanted those things. But now I kind of it helped me refine sort of my journey and how I look at next opportunities a little bit differently.
Oh, absolutely. And I think age changes as well, what you want to go
Yeah.
after that learning. So definitely on that. I would say I'm typical, in the midlife, maybe crisis. Yeah, but my why, it's like 10 years ago, I didn't think about retirement. Now I
Mhm.
think, how do I get there? I have like
Yes.
15, 17 years left. But at one point I would like to hone into, I think when you're so stuck and so focused, I think you lose a little bit the listening to learn. You go to listen to argue. I know it. I need to
Mm.
showcase that. And that is that what I think, what you described and train. I want to get that. And you lose that playfulness and that learning and listening from others. I think that's what I would say happened to me at that point in time.
You talked heavily about leadership. We talked about the several jobs you have had, the multicultural aspect, the clarity, importance of communication, taking risks. But when you look at your leadership specifically, are there specific instances that really helped you refine that leadership, maybe in the stage of where you at now, or leaders you have had, or even leadership principles that you have found, these work really well for me? If I have a team, this is what I share with the teams as far as how I operate.
So the two main kind of leadership styles I have, just naturally, I think we have all within to be successful.
Mm.
But the two which I have mostly is the leadership with the vision, the visionary leadership, or in some other things, it's called the leadership up front, is really driving that vision and then telling that and put your team along to that one. And I think it also comes then inspiring them to get to where it goes and then putting it into building blocks so that they can actually, what does that mean? Because if I say Microsoft vision, our mission is, helping everybody to have a better, work and place, etc. What does that mean? So that is then breaking it down and then getting them to work towards that and measuring towards. And I think the KPIs need to be often in place for them because a lot of people actually need structure. And then the second is for me that more coaching style and behind. So I have very senior people, they're all director level. So I don't need to teach them something. Sometimes you need to go back into the teaching mode, but I like the coaching side of the house. So how do I ask the right question to help them solve a problem, to be honest, because we deal with a lot of problems. You have been in sales strategy as well. It's basically you're constantly dealing with problems. How do you help them? Because that is how they learn and come together. And the third thing is, which I think is super, super important, we're not doing enough. We don't celebrate success because we constantly talk about the problem and the negative, and this is not working, that is not working. We forget actually what we achieved. So looking back and celebrating success to really help them, the team, but yourself, to create that kind of positive energy and looking how much did you achieve, because it's nothing operational. It's not a task list. Yes, the task list is nice. I really like them sometimes, but it's not with that higher kind of goal and mission that you would like to achieve. So that's the areas where I'm really good at. What I think where I need to learn more and where I think a lot of the sales strategist is because we're working in a very complex matrix organization. And you cannot do it yourself. You need to have marketing, you have product group, you have customer success, you have the field, you have finance, and you need to bring your ideas through. So that kind of leadership from the side or driving influence without authority is a huge of aspect. And I think that is one of the things which I constantly work with the team on and which I think is super important to be successful. But it's super hard because it's actually not looking at your own, what you want to achieve, is looking at the other one, understanding where that is and finding that common ground and driving that through. And it's that I think is a hard thing. So that's for me the area, what I, in my roles, is super important, what is for my team important. What I don't like on leadership is leadership with fear. That is not where I thrive. The other one is super micromanaging and you're just basically getting told what to do. That is not an area where I land well because I'm quite strong-headed. And the last thing is really, you need to be in the values. I'm going back in the values because that needs to shine through. And when you're in your values, you're being authentic and you can build that trusted relationship. If you don't have that, trying to build that up, and it's over time. It's not a thing that comes. People give you a certain kind of trust. So how do you not blow that? So have their back. Help them, getting up. Help them with executive presence. Everybody wants to grow, but being precise, being short, very hard topic, because we're working on 10 things, but we want to say the 10 things. No, what are the 3? So things like that, which I think makes the difference from a leadership style.
I love leading values, something that Tim, actually probably all the top leaders always say, that I hear them talk about it. If you're true to your core values, again, you'll be authentic and people will feel it, it will come out.
Yeah.
Celebrating success, I think it's super important. I so suck at. Nicole, do you have any tips? How do you celebrate success? I've been trying to establish, especially the mini wins, because I don't celebrate anything big, but I think every day there should be something we should celebrate. And I was thinking, I'm going to celebrate this or that, and I never do. Do you have any tips for that?
Yep. So I have Friday mornings, I have my team meeting, and we start our team meeting on celebrating success and giving affirmation on somebody who has done that good. And then I ask them to send that to these people.
That's a nice small tip. Just also reminds people to reflect on kind of the collaboration. So I actually think it probably helps with your last thing, like this impactful leadership and kind of understanding what other people have goals and need to do. Because I think that's a skill you can perfect forever. I think we're never perfect. It's like never ending continuum of growth in that, but it probably helps with that too.
Yeah, but it also helps because we're always looking at the next problem, but saying, hey, we have finished a pitch deck. Let's celebrate that. And you also let people know on what work you have done. And you can do great work. If nobody knows about it, it's not impactful.
Very true. So moving to leadership, maybe specifically to women. I know Microsoft is actually a great company when it comes to having many women in leadership positions, maybe one of the ones that people look at the most when it comes to the diversity. From your vantage point, what are some of the things that we women can practice more or be better at? Again, you had vast experience in your own personal consulting, but also at big companies through various different roles and cultures. So I'm even wondering from this, I don't know if I can say no cultural perspective or kind of all cultures perspective, maybe that's what it is that you've worked within. Anything you have observed that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think we need role models for other women in all kind of leadership roles, and even outside of leadership, just showing up as potentials. I give you a good example. You talked about Microsoft. When I was at Microsoft New Zealand, we had basically the head of Microsoft New Zealand was female, and she had females in her leadership team. None of them had kids. When I look at the other side at Microsoft US and corporate, and you look there, so from Amy Hood, who has kids, the CFO, from our chief people officer, who is actually a single mom,
Wow.
The next level, you have women, but women with kids. So something which I found important, I always wanted to make a career and have kids. And it's actually not that easy. And everybody who wants to talk more about it, ping me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share. But it's like having these role models is I think, good for me. That's the first thing. Then being open. And let me tell you an example. Being open and driving girls through doing different things. When my girls were in school in New Zealand, they were in a private progressive school. Yes, it was private. But they started coding in grade 2, and they took from the school part in robotics competition. And my oldest actually went twice to the New Zealand national competition from 10 years on. We have a Lego robot at home. We have a 3D printer at home. She built that in the robotics club. We moved to Germany. There was a robotics club, boys only. She didn't feel included, probably knew far more about the robots itself than these ones. But since then, this topic is dead, and the robot is in the garage sitting there. So we need these kind of things. So there is an interest, and there are people there, but we need to open it up. And I'm not a fan of like quotas for women in leadership, etc. But maybe we need it, And I would encourage every woman who does something, don't don't stay with yourself and saying, I'm good. Talk about it. Share it, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you inspire other women to follow and think, okay, it can be done. And I can have a life that fulfills me, and I can give that to my further kids. And for all the dads who are listening, if you have children and girls, think about what model you want to have for your girls. If you want to have these kind of old boys club, which we're seeing a lot in companies still there, but it needs to be changed, I think, from down there.
I love that you mentioned it. If I can actually pause and drill a little bit deeper, because I have been thinking about this for quite a while, and I personally am not finding the answer to it. And I feel the same way. I love seeing women thrive and powerful leaders, obviously having conversations with amazing leaders like you and many others I have recently had on the podcast too. And so the more I see women thriving in whatever they choose to thrive at, whatever industry or business or profession or sports, it's just fantastic. And I think to myself, why my brain just wants to see this. And I'm also tempted always to like see how they're doing things, see what I can borrow and adapt, and kind of how they're going about things. Do you think men are the same? Because you obviously have a household of women, or maybe even from women perspective. Why do you think we're so driven towards seeing other women thrive as an inspiration for our own greatness and next progress?
It's, I think we are different to men. I believe we are far more emotional. Now, we can argue, is it the upbringing or not? I don't know. But
Or
I
it could be
definitely,
the hormonal cycle. We actually just
yes,
talk about it with one
definitely.
of my friends. I think that goes into it too. Yeah.
And I think, so I think it's both, but a little bit, but I
Mm.
think there is a difference just really from our DNA and how we build up. And I think we work differently, we think differently. Yeah. It's like when I explain where you want to go, I talk more in pictures. Hey, here at the house with the green light, with that green kind of things. That's where not in 200 meters you need to go right. So I think there is difference on how we talk. I think so. That's the first thing. I think we have far more what I would call imposter syndrome. That's maybe more the upbringing. Yeah, so that when we're seeing other women, we can say, okay, if they have done it, we can do it as well. But I read the other day a statistic, or someone told it me. So you have female founders like having a hair salon, having this, but not big corporations. So why is that? I think from an inspiring and having seen the way somebody has done it, and you could talk. I would love for people coming more to me and ask me, because I definitely am afraid to ask people for help. Yeah. And I think we need to come over as strong being as women, and you're getting drawn that if you want to have a career, and there is so much more which people can help you in being that vulnerable. I found that so refreshing, having seen that, and that is helping a lot as well. Where I think we women are actually against it. I had women leaders who were very more like ice cold, like you would say, they trying to be male leaders and getting even more male than them. And then it's really hardcore. That's what I don't like. But I don't have the answer, Matt. My
Yeah.
observations.
Yeah, the leadership styles are definitely just another thing to get into. And I've seen all sides. I actually think sometimes because there's so few women, the higher up you go, the more you risk being so perfect and so strict, to where you become more sometimes like hardcore, as you mentioned, almost more on the side than men, just because I think we put our own sort of standards and we lose a little
Mhm.
bit of what we talked about earlier, like the playfulness. So
Yeah.
that's what I have seen actually some other leaders, like how do you maintain this playfulness and just shake things off easier. We talked actually about that a little bit with Eve, my other guest on the podcast, who was also works at Microsoft. She had some fantastic tips. So, and maybe last couple questions to close off with. 2024 is here. We talked about all the turbulent times actually that are going on all fronts. Anything you would want to share with listeners that you would want to inspire them to be doing more of or less of, even maybe things that you're trying out nowadays and that are working out for you?
The world is changing so much, so being open, listen to learn, and regardless of the situation you're in, and don't listen to argue or think you know it
Mm.
all. We are all not perfect and we can improve. And especially as so many new technologies coming in, and we Germans are always, no, 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 especially there, try to understand the perspective of the other person's have and if there could be learning for you on this. And I think then the world would be more nice and it actually can shortcut your career. But I think also from where we are, with the world politics, etc.,
Mm.
we would have a nicer place.
Excellent. And from technology perspective, that made me think about your answer, technology. Anything you're personally excited about, Nicole?
I thinking a lot about how AI can change and how we think about go to market. I actually think CRM systems will probably be disruptive because actually nothing has changed. We have still the same process, but it's not
Mm.
the same linear process. Customers go like that. And I think there we will see disruption on how AI can change designing go to market and how can we listen, use data to actually predict that. I think that's where I'm excited about to learn and I'm digging
Mm.
into.
All that and what you had mentioned earlier about CRM, I can see how that would potentially just drastically change the way business is done, strategy is created, and companies operate, because that literally lies on the intersection of data and all of the other decisions that the business needs to make and execute on. So, love
Yeah,
that.
and I think also we were, if you look at that, we were having very on-prem, we went into cloud, but with subscription. I think the world is moving with AI far more and more into consumption, which means, previously, if you think a technology sales cycle, you had a little bit of marketing, heavy sales, and then a little bit customer success. The marketing side goes more into sales. Customer success is getting more important because you're only getting paid if they consume. So that will change a lot as well.
Mm. I like those predictions. Maybe we need to do a separate podcast on that. I didn't create enough time. That sounds super exciting. So, what's the best way to reach out? Anyone who wants to connect, Nicole, I'll add your LinkedIn profile to the episode with your permission. But is there any other way to follow you or email you?
The best is really LinkedIn. Send me a connect request. Mention the podcast. And actually, I have my personal email address. My email address and the contact details is open. Yes, you can send me an email then from there as well. But start with LinkedIn. That's where it's the easiest way to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the time and your conversation, Nicole. It was great learning about your Grand Slam journey from Germany skiing to being the leader at Microsoft, perhaps changing the world with AI and CRM and software management platforms. So I'm curious what's going to come out next.
Yeah, thank you, Klara, for having me. It was really, I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.